Hello and happy Thursday, everybody. I'm Marissa Campbell, and this is Art of Heart. And I have a super cool guest today who's going to share her story, but I have to tell you kind of how we met. So, we both have a really amazing LinkedIn presence. And if you notice, we share a last name, and the letter of our first name is the same. And Mollie has a company called MC Speaks Up. And when I was launching MC Speaks, the algorithm shoved us together in the most serendipitous of ways. And we connected and we chatted and we had such a good call, just a very like human connection call about who we are and what we're doing and our stories. And her story is one that needs to be told for sure. And it touched my heart in a way because typically in business, you see people being like territorial around things. And that was very much not our first experience together. It was really about what are we doing and how are we showing up today and how are our hearts really driven to help other people's hearts. And so without further ado, Mollie, will you introduce yourself?
Thank you, Marissa. Yes, I just love how we can connect on the Ethernet and make wonderful connections. So I'm delighted to meet you and happy to be on your podcast today. I am a survivor of domestic abuse, and you mentioned being sort of territorial about our stories. I am at the point in my life where I'm not going to be territorial. I'm going to be sharing it. So my second marriage was an abusive marriage with my husband at the time. We were married for 8 years, and I suffered all different kinds of abuse. At the time, I didn't know I was being abused. I just thought, oh, he's difficult to live with, or he's got some challenges. And because it was a second marriage, was for both of us, but for me, I was thinking, gonna give it the old, college try, and I'm gonna stick with it and try therapy, try talking differently, and ignoring the red flags all the while. And after 8 years, I had enough, and I decided on about a Tuesday of the week that I left him that I'd had enough. And finally, those red flags were right in my face and I couldn't ignore them any longer. So I took a couple of days to make a plan. Didn't take a long time, but I did make a plan. Decided what I was going to take from the house. Went around to each room. Said, okay, I can take that. I can take that. I'll have to leave that. I can take that because I was going to leave when he was at work. And I didn't know how long I would have before being scared he was going to come home. This was right in the beginning of COVID, and my employer had sent everyone home to work, but his employer was still requiring him to come to work every day. So I didn't know if this was going to be the day he went to work and then, oh, we're going to send everybody home. And I was afraid for my life because he had a gun loaded in the bedside table. And I was certain if he felt threatened enough or mad enough, he would use it on me. He'd already threatened to shoot my daughter's boyfriend's dog. So I went into went into the survival mode. And on Friday morning, the morning I left, he goes to work and I go into action. And I'm glad I had a plan before I did because I knew what clothes I was going to take, what papers I was going to take, what I could put in a laundry basket, what I could throw into a garbage bag, or my clothes. I just lifted off the rod in the closet and just threw them into the back seat. And it took me about an hour and a half, and I panicked the whole time. One of the times I was going in and out of the house, I remembered we had a security camera on the front door, and it had not been working. But I had this panic attack thinking, "Oh my gosh, he's got a new battery or he's fixed the passcode," and it would be just like him not to tell me that it was working again. But I couldn't worry about that. I just had to keep going. And so in and out of the front door, upstairs to the attic, to the bedroom, to the closet, to the kitchen, to the den, the things that I knew I could take that I could only put in my car because I had to leave the rest of it behind. Um, and I rationalized with myself that it was just stuff. I was getting away with my life, and that made it a little easier. Those things could be replaced, but in the little amount of time that I had, I thought I'll get everything that I can get. So, got to the end of packing up my car, and it looked like, you go maybe to the Walmart parking lot and you see a car that's full to the brim, and you think it may be a hoarder uh, that's packed everything in their life. Well, that was me, except I didn't have the food wrappers on the dashboard. And so I got finished. I couldn't put any more in the car, and I drove away. And I realized that I drove away no longer a victim, but as a survivor. And I didn't look back. I protected myself. Um, it's funny though that that was as far as the plan got, of like what I was going to do because well, I did make 2 stops. I went to the post office immediately and changed my address, and then I went to the bank. I don't know why I thought this was a smart thing to do, but I went to the bank and I emptied my checking account and got a cashier's check. I guess I thought I was gonna go open a new account and, have a clean break, but what I didn't realize was I needed to go rent a place to live, and I needed to write a check for the down payment. And so I actually showed up at this complex where I was going to rent, no plan in place, just went there, saw 2 units, decided picked one, and then I sat back down in the office with the complex secretary, I guess, and I told her, "I've just left my husband. All I have is in my car. I need a place to live." So she was fine with that. I don't know how many times that's ever happened to her. But I wrote a hot check. I told her what I'd done. I wrote a hot check, and then I went back to the bank, put the money back in the bank account, and sat in the parking lot and started texting people that my life had just changed. Because, Marissa, at this point, no one in my life knew what I was going through. Nobody at my job, my family, my children, my mom, my friends, my neighbors, no one. Because domestic abuse survivors have this canny ability to hide and keep things private and keep things a secret. And a lot of that has to do with stigma. It has to do with fear. It has to do with shame. And then I texted my ex or my husband at the time, and I texted him that I was leaving him. Immediately, my phone blows up with my family and him wanting to know, what's going on. My family, of course, is very supportive, and I don't answer his calls. So that was the start of a new life. I left when I was 58 years old. Um, I I was fortunate, am fortunate that I have an education. I have I had at the time I had an income, I had a job, and I knew I could survive. I knew I could survive without him. Um, my daughter later told me that she was afraid I was gonna go back, and I assured her that I wasn't. But I've later learned, as I've been on this journey, that there's a statistic that it takes a victim an average of 7 attempts before they finally successfully leave their abuser. So I guess I was lucky. I was strong. The bonds that held me were not so tight that I couldn't break from them. I know it's kind of cliche to talk about it that way, but there's so many reasons victims will return to their abuser, and I broke free and started on a healing journey. Now, remember, it's also COVID. This was April of 2020. So I was in pretty much isolation, which in a good way prevented us from being out. And I thought I was safe with him not trying to come and find me because he didn't want to. He didn't want to catch COVID, and this was the early days. We didn't know, you know how bad it was going to be.
Right. So, as we go back in your story a little bit, you talked about the red flags. And I think a lot of times, like, there's a lot of jokes about red flags, but the truth is, there are red flags that present themselves in all kinds of situations we shouldn't be in. When when you were in the beginning of the relationship and you started to realize that maybe I know there's a lot of pressure to make things work, right? Especially with this, like the second marriage or whatever the case is, we don't want to feel like we're a failure, right? Um, and so when you started seeing the red flags, what was happening in your brain? Were you like, "Well, this is gonna get better," or what was happening? What were you thinking with the different red flags?
Well, as I said, I thought part of it was that he was difficult to deal with. He was difficult to get along with, but I was ignoring the red flags and I was thinking, "Oh, this is just him. This is what
Mm,
happens. This is how it is to be." Um, some of the red flags in the very beginning started even before we got married. They were his attempts to alienate me and separate me from my friends and family. And that started before we were married, especially with the friends. Only wanted to do stuff with me, caused great drama when I wanted to continue seeing my girlfriends.
mm,
And I ignored it in the beginning because I thought, well, I guess I thought it was kind of endearing. Oh, he loves me so much. He wants to spend his time with me. And I wasn't aware. I just wasn't aware that this was a tactic, that this was going on. Um, he also had a tactic called love bombing, where he just showered me with gifts. And they were little things. I mean, they weren't huge, like diamond rings and jewelry and vacations. It was little things, but it was constant, and constant calling me. Well, in the beginning, I thought that was endearing, but when it occurred incessantly after we were married, it started interrupting my work. It started interrupting my time out. It started interrupting going out, having lunch with a friend. Um, so it wasn't, I didn't see it in the beginning. It was only later that I started seeing these signs. And some people ask me, well, what was the final straw? And I would say there wasn't one final straw. There were like three. One of them, the 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 last one actually was therapy. We tried several attempts at therapy over the years, and we kept getting fired by the therapist. And this happens when you're married to a narcissist who doesn't think there's anything wrong with him. There's nothing to work on. There's no inner work. There's no deep work. There's no work on shadow. There's no inner reflection. And so we go for a couple or 3 visits, and, after maybe something happened, and then that event, goes by in time, and the therapist would say, "Well, I'd like to work with," I won't name him, but "work with your husband, um, separately." And this happened like 3 or 4 times. And the last
Mhm.
time it happened, of course, now we're on our 3rd or 4th therapist, and we had homework to do at home. And I said to we had now been separated with 2 different therapists. And with my therapist, I said, I just don't see him making any change. I'm doing the work, but I don't
Yeah.
see any change in him." And by this time, we're in telemedicine because of COVID, so she texts her partner, who my ex was seeing, and, we finished our session, and the partner texts back, and my therapist said, "Well, he's not doing the work." I said, "Well, that's it.
Yeah.
I'm done." Before, it was another instance where he and I were having lunch. We were still speaking. We were having lunch, and we were in my car at lunchtime, sitting on the street in front of my office building, and got some takeout or whatever. And my boss drove by in his truck and went into the parking deck. And I waved at my boss. Well, my ex had this super jealous streak and was constantly falsely accusing me of inappropriate behavior, affairs, and went into this gyrations in the car and said, "Why are you waving at him that way?" And he demonstrated what he thought I did, like that. It's like, and I remember turning to him with my mouth open to defend myself for about the thousandth time.
Mhm.
And I shut my mouth and I thought, "Girl, you don't have to defend yourself for being
No,
friendly." Because that was
no.
a common theme.
It's a normal behavior. It's normal to, like I
Oh,
last week, we were, I was, on the we I live in a small town. And my favorite thing about living in a small town is when you see your people, like, in the wild. And we were on our way to Costco, and I saw, a friend of mine who does my hair, and I was like, "Wait, shit, that's her boyfriend's car." I was like, "It's totally them." And we're waving and sticking out the car, we're so excited. That's normal. That's not weird. It's not weird that you would wave to your boss and say hi. Like, we were literally hanging out of the car, we were so excited. It's
yeah.
small town living.
One time he would call me, like I said, incessantly, and I was at lunch with a work colleague, and he calls me at lunch, and I'm tired of always answering the phone. It's like, "Dude, I'll be home later or I'll call you later." So I didn't have my phone on because I actually turned it off. You know what he did? He ended up calling the company, saying it was a family emergency, got another colleague of mine because the switchboard transferred it to another colleague of mine who said, you know, my ex gives this sob story. It's There's a family emergency. He needs to get me. And my other colleague says, "Oh, well, I happen to know Mollie's at lunch with blah, blah, blah. I'll call the other colleague." Calls the other colleague. And now I'm sitting across from her at lunch, and she gets this call and says, "Oh, your ex is, or your husband's trying to reach you. Apparently, there's a family emergency." So I step out of the restaurant because couldn't hear in there anyway. I step out, call him. "No family emergency. I was just missing you. I just needed to hear your voice," which was a common theme. He went to all that trouble, told a lie, to try and reach me just because he wanted to talk to me. No, he was trying to find me to make sure he knew where I was, keeping tabs on me. He was stalking me. This was one of the things that I didn't realize during the relationship that was a form of abuse was stalking. I thought stalking was, oh, crazy person stalks a high profile media person and wants to take pictures of them, all the time. No, this is a form of stalking. Um, the third thing that was the one that I just couldn't take anymore was he threatened suicide 3 times.
Mm.
Just threatened, didn't but I knew he had the means because he had the gun. But he did it as a means of control and getting attention. And the day I left him, he threatened it again, and got some gullible friend hooked that started calling me saying, "Oh, I'm afraid, I'm afraid he's gonna commit suicide." I didn't even answer the phone. He didn't. 6.5, 5.5 years later, he's still alive, but it was a means of
So
control and getting attention.
absolutely. And so I think the thing that people don't realize is that all of these are number one red flags and signs of abuse, but under the guise of like love or um like want or things that are not like real. Like of course you don't want anyone to commit suicide, but again, it was a form of manipulation, not I generally I need help. Like those are different things. And even the like the stalking and the trying to find you, it's wonderful that your partner's like, "Oh, I missed you. I wanted to hear your voice." But who calls and feigns a family emergency in
Right.
the middle of a business lunch? Like, it's just those things aren't normal, and so for as people have heard your story and you're so brave to tell your story and to share these details because I do think that people don't realize when they're in the throes of it that these things are not normal, healthy, loving things, and they don't look at it as a full picture. They look at these individual instances like, "Well, it's okay. He really missed me," or the love bombing or whatever it is, and the truth is there were all of these red flags
Yeah,
that were impacting your everyday life in
yeah,
such a negative way.
absolutely. And there were a lot of different kinds of abuse. And a common theme that I hear from some victims who are still in it or who are recently out of it was, "Well, he didn't hit me, so it wasn't
Mm,
abuse." And girl, there are all kinds of abuse that aren't physical. And that's why I talk about this space or this trauma as domestic abuse and not domestic violence, because it's more than violence. It's more than the
yeah,
physical abuse. It could be spiritual, could be sexual, could be emotional, could be all the other. I'm blanking now, but just a whole plethora of alienation from family and friends, trauma bonding, gaslighting, and I suffered a lot of those. And I think back now to when I was going through it and the times that when I was working, how it might have helped me see these red flags earlier if I had been in some sort of environment where that information was available. Which
yeah,
is why now I have turned my experience into being a professional speaker about domestic abuse awareness. And I enjoy talking to employers because how many of us go to work? A lot of
yeah,
us go to work. We have an employer. And I think about, what if my company at that time had had a domestic abuse awareness policy? What if there had been like posters or notices either physically in the building or on our intranet? What if I knew that my human resources professional was available to just go and talk to? Or
yeah.
what if I knew that the Employee Assistance Program or the EAP had services that I could tap into? Might I have gotten out sooner? I think so.
Yeah,
Um, and for some victims, it might have saved their life. Um,
absolutely.
yeah,
So when we think we think about what your heart looked like, on the day you were leaving. Can you describe that for us?
It was a shambles. It was in pieces. It was it was broken up. It was a lot of unknown. Um, but I knew that night that I went to bed, because I did end up going to Walmart looking like one of those hoarders, and I bought an air mattress because I left with what I could put in the car, and
Mhm.
I rented an apartment that had no furnishings. So I knew when I went to bed that night in my little apartment on my air mattress that I was starting to put the pieces back together. I was gonna build my life back together, and I have a photograph of that air mattress on the floor that evening, and the only things on the floor next to me was my purse and some photographs of my family.
So powerful when you think about the puzzle pieces, like, you didn't have it all figured out, but you
No.
were putting the pieces back together even that very same day.
Yes.
And so as people are facing hard things in life, the act of choosing yourself and saving yourself will instantly begin to put the pieces back together.
Yeah.
That's the reality of it.
Yes. Yes, absolutely.
So your second story is really cool because I think that oftentimes we don't talk about the hard things, we hide them. And you did the exact opposite. And you took your experience, um, and you realized that there was a gap and there was a need for other people to feel seen and to have tools and to be able to know that there's an alternative to put their pieces back together. So can you share your second story with us?
Absolutely. So it wasn't all peaches and roses and unicorns and rainbows because 2 years after I left, I lost my job, and, that was, still early COVID. That was hard because, um well, I mean, anytime you lose your job, it's difficult, but I, did the usual things of trying to rebuild, find another job, did some HR consulting, and then answered the call to start speaking about my experience with my domestic abuse, with my abusive husband. I thought first I was going to write a book, and I did sit down for several weeks, but it was just cathartic just to get it out, to get my story down on paper. But once I started telling people about my story, I started realizing it was resonating because what what was coming true for me was the statistic that 1 in 3 women will experience domestic abuse at some time in their life. And I started being in
Wow.
crowds like at a women's retreat, standing around one evening. It's a mixer, how you get to know each other. And I started telling my story quietly. It's not like I wasn't the public speaker then. Well, I came home, and after telling my story to about 7 or 8 people, 2 or 3 of them came to me quietly and said, "Yes, I'm a survivor as well. And you're so brave to be
Wow.
talking about it." And I thought, well, I need to be
So
brave
brave.
because y'all aren't talking about your experience. And I'm going to be on a mission now to erase this stigma, to erase this shame. Because what I was realizing and what I started telling people was this was not my fault. I
Mhm,
did not cause this to happen to me. This was totally choices my abuser made. Now, you
mhm.
can talk about, oh, he may have had a hard childhood or terrible upbringing. Yeah, that's true. I had a
A
difficult
lot of people do.
childhood. A lot
Yeah,
of
a
people
lot of
have
people do.
difficult childhoods and they don't turn into abusers. These were
Mhm.
choices, conscious choices that he made. And so that's part of the stigma is that, oh, what will people think of me? This is a reflection of what's of me, of my past and what I've gone through. Girl, no, it isn't. You didn't
No.
cause him slap you upside the head and give you a traumatic brain injury. It wasn't you that caused
Mhm.
him to put his cigarette out on your arm. So I started speaking and I said, I'm going to not only tell my story, but I want to educate people about the different forms of abuse because I didn't know what all the different
Right.
forms were. I knew what I went through and I found a calling and it's my mission now. I like speaking to all different kinds of groups, whether it's a women's leadership or empowerment group or a group of employees at a company or to HR professionals saying this is happening. If 1 in 3 women in America, actually in the world, are experiencing this, that means 1 in 3 women at your workplace are dealing with this trauma every day, and they
Yeah.
leave their
Like
abuser at home and come to work where they
yeah.
hope that it's a safe place. Well, sometimes in my case, my abuser kept calling me at work. I couldn't get away from him. And fortunately, I worked for 2 different employers that had high security, so he never attempted to come to the office to come find me but that's not all that was the case.
And when you think about 1 in 3, so, when you were telling the part of the story when you were at a networking event and 1 in 3 and people are coming up to you, like, it gave me chills because 1 in 3? Like, if you're sitting at a meeting today at work or if you are with a group of people today and you think about that staggering statistic that 1 in 3 women are not safe, that is, first of all, it's appalling. Second of all, the fact that you're like, "Well, I need to speak up. I need to be brave, and I need to be talking about these things," is incredible. But, like, we all like, everybody if everybody spoke up and was brave, and everybody could share their story, maybe the number wouldn't be 1 in 3 anymore. Maybe it goes to 1 in 5 or 1 in 10.
Exactly.
And so, the more that these stories can be told, and the more that women can see there are options and this is not normal and recognize the red flags, I do really think that it's a number that could change if we just were brave and shared our stories.
Yes. Um, yes, and that comes from talking. That comes from not hiding this under a shadow, keeping it in the dark. Let's shine a light on it. My in my work career, I've been a human resources professional for over 30 years. And I can recall when we didn't talk about sexual harassment and it was going on in the workplace. Well, now we have laws, we have workplace policies, we have posters, we have training, we have education. We talk about it.
Yeah,
And look at the advances because we started talking about it, because victims started coming forward and talking about it, and
yeah,
because we erased the stigma. We may still have a lot of long ways to go, but I think about the same way with domestic abuse. Let's talk about it.
yeah. Let's talk about
I
it.
mean, think about some of the other things we do talk about. We talk about body parts. We advertise medicine for erectile dysfunction. We have
Yep.
fundraising events for prostate cancer and breast cancer. Um, so we're past, the point of not talking about sexual harassment, and we need to do it with
Yeah.
domestic abuse awareness.
Absolutely. So as you began your journey and being brave and having these conversations and turning um really hard things into your way to give back, because really that's what you're doing. Like you're turning something horrific into your life's work, which is wonderful. But tell me what your heart looks like when you think about that.
So compared to when I left, it's such a full heart. It's such a full heart because every audience I'm in, I might not know the impact of my speaking, And if I have just one person have an aha moment in that audience, then it's totally worth it. And so I go home a lot of times after a speaking event and I think, I don't know who I affected, but maybe I had an impact on one person, or maybe I had an impact on the whole room. And um, the Purple Heart is something that I use in my work. I use it when I sign my name on signatures, on my email signature and messages. And the purple ribbon is a universal symbol for domestic abuse aware or domestic violence awareness. And so I carry I carry these stories, and I carry knowing about these women. And I'm going to pause here and say the domestic abuse affects men and women. The statistic for women is 1 in 3, but the statistic for men being victims of abuse is 1 in 7, which is
Wow.
is staggering to think about. But this is not a women's issue or a men's issue. This is a people's issue. And
Yeah.
it's not just a private issue at home. It's an issue we need to deal with in public, at the workplace. Everywhere people gather is an opportunity to address it. So I have a very full heart. I have a very full heart of the people that I know that I've had an impact on, and the people I don't even know.
It's amazing to see how life has come very full circle for you. So, before we say goodbye, what is one piece of advice you would leave listeners with?
Um, I'm going to modify the answer to give advice to two different groups of people.
Okay.
If you're a victim, there are resources to help you get out. If you're a victim, know that it is not your fault. What you're experiencing are choices made by your abuser, and there is life after abuse. I'm living proof of it. I live a very fulfilling life now. I'm resilient. We're more resilient, and I have a great peace of mind. If you're not a victim, but you may know someone who's in this situation, um, it's not going to be your job to get them away from their abuser, but you can be there for them. As simple as saying, I'm here for you. How can I help you? Everyone needs to stay safe, but there are resources for both groups of people. There are resources for victims. I have a lot of them on my website. And some of those same resources are there for family and friends that want to help. I don't know what to say. I don't know what to do. It could be that you might be the person that the victim packs their getaway bag and stashes it at your house. It could be that you're the employer and they stash their getaway bag at their office. Allow them to do that. You can be that kind, safe place. Or you maybe in their getaway bag, they have a burner phone. Can they leave it at your place? Or you have a secret word or a secret phrase that if I called you, Marissa, you and I understand that if I call you and say, um, I'll make this up, the plumbers can't come until Tuesday afternoon. That's
Mhm.
our key phrase that Marissa, now you know you're going to call the police because I'm in
Mhm.
trouble.
Yeah,
So you could have a phrase or a word um, with your family or friend. The last piece of advice, if you're a victim, that I would tell you is tell someone, reach out. Do not keep this to yourself. There is no shame. You shouldn't be ashamed, and you shouldn't feel the stigma of being a victim. So
that
please
is
speak up.
that is wonderful advice. So what I'm left with today is that there is life on the other side, and there's a beautiful, full life on the other side. And I'm so grateful for the work you're doing and for the lives that you're touching and for the beautiful fullness of your heart today.